Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Q&A. I'm Raphielle Johnson, joined as always by Noah Rubin. We're back after a 2-week holiday break. Got a lot to discuss in fantasy basketball in terms of injuries, lineup changes, even had a trade while we were gone too. So looking forward to some of your questions, and I'm also looking forward to tomorrow's game between Cleveland and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, it'll be pretty fun to see on national TV, I believe. Two teams that have a combined 9 losses at this point, which is pretty wild that, two 30-win teams in January will get to face off. So it'll be a good matchup. I think both teams should be relatively healthy aside from Chet Holmgren. So it should be a good matchup.
Yeah, Oklahoma City, they've already beaten the Knicks and the Celtics over the weekend, and now they get shot at the top team in the East, top team in the NBA for that matter, in Cleveland. So they pull off that 3-game run, extend their streak to 16 straight wins. I'll say a lot about their chances to win a title, as you said, without Chet Holmgren right now. So
definitely.
Just got some questions built up in the queue, and we'll start with Ryan. Ryan, thanks for tuning in. Speaking of the Thunder, are you worried about Jalen Williams? He's been in a slump for 5 weeks now, averaging 42 fantasy points on the season, but 31 the past 5 weeks in ESPN points leagues.
I mean, I wouldn't say I guess it is something that's worrying in the sense that I think frustrating is honestly a better word than worry, just because I think that he's a good enough player that I'm not like, oh, okay, this is who he is now. He's been a really good fantasy player since he was drafted, basically. So I think it is just kind of he's just hasn't been as good as he was at the start of the year. But I don't see a reason why he can't turn that around, even if it has been kind of a lengthy slump, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I think he's shooting about 41% from the field over the past month. That obviously isn't who he is as a player. So I think he'll turn around. It's just a matter of when. But yeah, I wouldn't be concerned. I think he's just too good of a player to kind of stay in a prolonged slump, beyond this point. So I think he'll turn around pretty soon. Ryan has another question. Lineup change in Minnesota. Do you think Dante DiVincenzo is a must roster with him being inserted into the starting lineup? He's been getting minutes the past week, but has been mid. 12-team ESPN points league.
I mean, I think it's a lot better than what his role was and what his production was earlier in the season. And obviously, so sorry, I was like just catching up on that. I think we saw what he did last year. Obviously with the Knicks, we've talked about that quite a few times on this, is that we shouldn't have that expectation that he can repeat what he did previously. But if he's back in the starting lineup and has been like the production's up, it's interesting that Minnesota's kind of making that move. I know they were relying on Mike Conley's playmaking a lot, but it just hasn't been the same this year. Like he hasn't been quite as effective in that role. I mean, he's an aging veteran. It's not all that surprising, but I think he is a player that should be rostered at this point, just because we've seen what he has done in the past and kind of recently.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Even though he didn't shoot the ball great last night, I think he was 5 for 12 from the field. He did have 9 rebounds, so he's going to get you value in some other areas, even if he's not like blowing up like some people may hope he would. So, yeah, I think he's worth rostering. As an aside for Minnesota, I'm a bit concerned what Anthony Edwards moving to the point does to Julius Randle. Had foul trouble last night, 2 for 10 from the field while he's on the floor. Those are two guys that like to have the basketball in their hands a lot, and now you're handing the keys to one of those two, even more so than it was before. So I'm interested to see what happens with Julius these next couple of weeks from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, I think Minnesota is just such an interesting team, an interesting fit, that they're trying to make this work with Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle as the top 2 scoring options, I guess. And like I kind of said just a minute ago, like Mike Conley has been so important to this team, but he's also, is he 37 now, I think, but he's like mid to late 30s. And like, that's just not going to be a sustainable thing. And I know that's probably part of the reason that they traded up to get Rob Dillingham. And then he had a few good games, and then it just hasn't really led to anything. I know he's missed some time recently with injuries, but we'll see if Anthony Edwards can develop as a player enough to make this thing work as kind of the primary ball handler. He had 8 assists in that last game, shot 29 shots. So I think it's safe to say the offense runs through him.
Definitely. Berkeley, California. 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. Trace Jackson Davis or a streamer spot. What do you guys think? I kind of
I
like
think he
Trace right
fills
now.
in as okay. I was gonna say
Yeah.
I think he fills in as a streaming spot, kind of.
Mhm.
Um, but it's been his role has been kind of inconsistent this year. And back in the starting lineup is good, but their
Yeah.
last game, I mean, the blowout kind of impacts things, but only 18 minutes.
Mhm.
I think it is pretty matchup dependent
Yeah.
what his role looks like his times, but he has been better than he was earlier in the year recently.
Yeah. I think if you need rebounds and blocks, then I think he's worth holding on to. Again, like all these questions, they all rely on your roster build, what you may need at the time. Like if you have rebounds and blocks, and I can definitely see you using it as a streaming spot as opposed to him because we're I think we're over 2 months into the season. We still don't have like a concrete rotation for Golden State beyond Curry, Wiggins, and Draymond, I would say. So, Trace has been playing better basketball, but I can see the argument to use a streamer spot as well if you don't need what he brings to the table necessarily.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it.
All right, another question. Any insight on Tari Eason? I'm getting nervous. No insight here, and you should be getting nervous because I am as well. It's the same injury that limited him to 24 games last season, as we discussed on previous shows. And they removed a benign tumor from his leg in the spring. So, you have another recurrence of this issue. It's certainly a concern in terms of fantasy value and just general life value as well, to see what he can do moving forward. So, obviously, Amin Thompson's already rostered in most leagues. It probably puts Cam Whitmore into the mix a bit coming off the bench. So, yeah, if you have Tari Eason, this might be the time where you start to, if you don't have an IL spot to stash him, you may have to strongly consider dropping him.
Yeah, I think it would be nice. I don't think there is any sort of insight that I've seen as far as
Yeah.
Tari Eason. I'm pretty sure the last update I saw was Ime Udoka saying that he doesn't think it's going to be a season-ending injury the way it was last season. Which,
Mhm.
okay, cool. Like that doesn't tell us anything. That
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he still might be out 2 to 3 months. He might be out a week. Like we
Mhm.
no clue there. So yeah, I think nervous is a fair word. I think frustrating is also a very fair word, but it's just that's the reality of the situation. And yeah, Raph mentioned the guys that'll benefit from it.
Yosef, Happy New Year to you as well.
New Year.
He's also got a question. Should I trade my Josh Hart and OG Anunoby for Anthony Edwards and 12-team 9-cat head-to-head? Feels too much even though I drafted OG in the 7th round and Hart in the 11th. Edwards was drafted 11th in the 1st round.
I mean, I think the way I would look at it is I get caught up doing this sometimes too, and like looking at where I drafted players and like trying to make it make sense value wise based off that. But I feel like we're at the point of the season that like it's dangerous to do that.
Yeah.
So we just need to be looking at like what they have been over the course of the season, as opposed to where we drafted them, because you're trying to win your league, not win your draft, or like have like the best ADP, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's. I feel like this is relatively fair, and it could kind of depend on what categories you need help in, because obviously Josh Hart and OG aren't doing anywhere near the scoring and the 3-point production that Anthony Edwards is, but you're probably getting more well-rounded numbers. So if it's a just kind of classic 12-team 9-cat, like it says, then look at where you need help, or look at, if maybe you feel fine in points or you're punting points, in which case, I think that's a fair move. Or I guess, sorry, it'd be flip the Josh Hart and OG for Anthony Edwards, but it can still be looked at like that. Do you need that extra scoring 3-point, now maybe even assist boost?
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, because you're going to lose rebounding and defensive stats for these guys, assists as well in terms of Josh Hart. So if you have cover in those categories, then certainly this is a good deal. Strongly consider, if not just make outright. But yeah, that's. I think Noah stated it perfectly in terms of reading where we drafted guys versus where they are once the season goes into play. So, locally asked, I picked up Ryan Dunn for the 5-banger week. Do you think he has value beyond that now that he is starting?
Yes. I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
he's been just looking at the past 2 weeks on Basketball Monster top 100, like 87th specifically, and he still hasn't been great. Like he's shooting the ball a little bit better. I know he like
Mhm.
started off the season shooting way better than we expected he ever would,
Yeah,
and then he kind of fell off a little bit. Now more recently he's been able to hit shots pretty well. I wouldn't
mhm.
rely on him for that, but that's a nice boost. And the defensive numbers are starting to kind of be there, not
Yeah,
all the time, but that's what he was drafted for. Like what made him more of a fantasy commodity than a late first, like where he was drafted, is the fact that he had that unreal defensive stat rate in college.
mhm.
And that, it'll translate eventually. It hasn't quite yet, but yeah, he's been, what is this, 8 or 9 straight games with at least a three. The blocks and steal numbers have been pretty solid. The rebounds, he's been okay, scoring double figures a few times recently. So yeah, especially if this is just kind of his role now. Like he is the starter.
Mhm.
They're moving Bradley Beal to the bench. They are trying to trade him. They're trying to get him to waive his no trade clause. Like that's what the reports are saying, which is just an
Yeah,
odd situation. But Ryan Dunn, yeah, the numbers are going to be there. I'm pretty confident it'll be streaky because he's a rookie, but
mhm.
I like it.
Yeah. 'Cause they pretty much had too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, from a scoring standpoint with their starters as it is. So yeah, losing certainly motivated them to make these changes. So I think Dunn will have value just because of what he brings defensively. And you're playing in a lineup with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Like he's going to get opportunities to get clean catch and shoot looks. So I think the shooting will. I don't know if he'll become an elite shooter overnight. I definitely don't
Right.
think that, but I think he can be a little bit better than he has been for the most of the season. And we've seen the numbers pick up recently too. Archaic Sun asks, would you trade Jalen Brown and Walker Kessler for Tyrese Halliburton, 12 team, 9 cat? What do you think about Jalen? And also, what do you think about Jalen Duren for the rest of the season? I
I
think I would
think
make that trade.
I think it's very dependent on categories,
Yeah.
which I know it's like literally the cop out answer that we use every single time. But Halliburton, obviously, you're getting the assists. Kessler, you're getting the rebounds and blocks, high field goal percentage. But Jalen Brown has been not as good as we were probably hoping that he would be this season, or that he has been the last couple of seasons. Kind of inconsistent. So yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's at first glance, it's like Tyrese Halliburton. You mean the guy that has been not good this season or has been like one of the busts of the first round, but he's since kind of a slow start and he's still had some bad performances here and there. He's been getting back to close to the player that he has been the past couple of years, not quite
Mhm.
first round value, but very, very productive fantasy player. So yeah, I think that is a fine trade to make, especially when you think about you could be dealing with a shutdown for Walker Kessler eventually. Like that's just been the reality for the Jazz the last few years, and I don't
Yeah.
think that's going to change.
Yeah. Utah's been a bit more competitive than they may have thought they would be recently. So maybe that does open up the door for a young guy like Kessler to be shut down eventually because I know Miami's had its issues, but for Utah to beat them by 36 points, yeah, that's that
Yeah.
was certainly a shock to the system. As for Jalen Duren, that's he disappointed early. It feels like he's turned things around recently. 6 round value over the last 2 weeks. Um, I think he can sneak back into the top 100 by season's end. I think that would be about as high as I'd go in terms of rest of season value, in terms of where he can finish. But yeah, I think he just kind of dug himself a little bit too deep of a hole to start the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he is still like I think he just wasn't playing as well as
Yeah.
JB Bickerstaff needed him to get all the minutes, because the minutes being down is a big reason, that because it's not
Hmm.
that he's a worse rebounder and he's actually averaging more blocks per game, but the minutes just haven't been there the way they were last year, which I think is just more of a JB Bickerstaff thing. But it's been there a little bit more, still like somewhat inconsistent. I guess some of that is foul trouble, but um, he's still capable of locking up like a pretty easy double double when he plays 25 plus minutes per game. So it just hasn't been there necessarily consistently. But Detroit's won 7 out of 8. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Hmm. Given what happened last year, yeah, it's been good to see them
Yeah.
turn things around for sure.
Yeah.
All right. This one's going to take a little bit to get through. If you draft today, what would be your first round ranks for a 12-team league? Yeah. I think the top three of Jokic, Wemby, and SGA would be where I'd start.
Yeah.
You can probably interchange those guys too based on how they produce.
I agree with that. And I guess are we looking at this from like a rest of season draft kind of thing? Or like are we incorporating what's already happened, or are we just looking at what we expect to happen over the rest of the season?
I think we're incorporating what has happened this far into that. It's not
Okay.
really clear, but
Yeah. Okay. So we can look at, I would definitely say Jokic, Wemby, SGA. I know like we don't.
all right. Yeah, he's saying rest of season. Now he's cleared that up. So
Okay. Perfect. I'd still stick with that same three. And I know we don't look at just 9 cat ranks as this is what we should do. Like there's obviously a lot of context that helps give more accuracy to those rankings just because they're imperfect rankings. But the top 5 of 9cat over the course of the season, I think I would stick with that. Jokic, Wemby, SGA, AD, Cat. I think that's totally fine. Luka being out, Franz being out for a while, I think it moves them down a little bit, but I'm fine with Tatum and Sabonis up there. And then maybe, just the next few people would be Dame and stuff. I think
I'd probably
Halliburton's
drop
still a first
Vooch.
round guy.
Yeah.
No. Do not draft Vooch first round. Even if he's been first round in 9cat, which is just such an interesting thing to look at. But I don't know how many guys that is. That was top 5, then Tatum, Sabonis. That makes 7. So we're looking at 5 more players. I think you could look at Halliburton for sure, Joel Embiid for sure, for the rest of the season. Now that we're kind of past this, hopefully past that thing. I don't know who's that. That's 9 guys.
What about Giannis? Giannis?
Oh yeah. See, that's why we don't use strictly 9cat rankings for this stuff. But definitely Giannis.
And then I think a name I would throw in maybe for like pick 11 or 12, Evan Mobley. I think he's been outstanding this year. So I think if you're going to take a swing on anyone at the end of the first round in like a today draft for the rest of the season, I think Evan Mobley would be that guy because we've seen his offensive game expand and the defense is still there too.
Yeah, I like the Mobley pick. Maybe there's obviously a couple other candidates that we could look at. LeBron's been playing a lot better recently. I don't know if you would consider him a first rounder, but he's been playing better recently. Jalen Johnson, Kevin Durant, Tyrese Maxey. So, I think it's pretty hard to say, oh, this is the top 12 exactly. Like this is the order I draft them. But there's been some surprising guys, and again, looking at 9cat rankings is not the exact perfect model for how we should do this because Josh Hart is early second round. If we're just looking at the past 2 weeks, John Collins is 4th in 9cat value, but that's also he's only played one game during that stretch. But it's always fun to see those names randomly pop up. Where you're like, I don't think that's what it really is.
Yeah, agreed. All right, thoughts on Rudy Gobert? He has me worried. He's barely blocking 1.5 shots per game.
That's just kind of the reality of the situation. This is who he is. I think it is surprising that some of these numbers have gone down once they take Cat out of the lineup, and now Gobert isn't splitting time at center or having to play alongside another 7-footer. But he just hasn't been quite as effective this year. I don't want to rule out the possibility that he picks it up a little bit and gets you an extra rebound or 2, or field goal percentage moves up a couple points or gets you closer to 2 blocks at some point. But I think that's just he's just an aging big man.
And plus I think he's, in addition to Randall, he's someone else where he's not an offensive juggernaut, but I think at times they need to get him the ball to make sure he remains engaged. And that may be a concern when you have Anthony Edwards taking 29 shots as he did on Monday. So that's something else to keep an eye out for. James Chan asks, would you trade Harden, Scotty Barnes for Donovan Mitchell and Kevin Durant Trying to improve the field goal percentage and cut down the turnovers. 14-team roto.
I think I like that deal. I
Yeah.
think it would definitely help cut down on turnovers and help with field goal percentage because obviously Harden is great at a lot of things, and those are the two categories where he really, really hurts you. And then Donovan Mitchell and KD definitely help that. So yeah, I do think that is a deal that I would be fine doing because you're not gonna. I mean, probably the main hit you're taking, just off the top of my head, would be assists.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to cut down turnovers, then that's just kind of what happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's only like a handful of players that are actually productive in assists that don't hurt you with turnovers. So
Yeah, that's a good point. KD's had some high turnover games, but it hasn't been the norm for him. On the other side, Harden's at 19 straight games with at least 4 turnovers. So that's pretty much what you're going to get from him. Also, Kawhi Leonard hasn't played enough to kind of truly impact his efficiency. I think that will happen eventually, but if you're looking to make this trade now, I definitely think I would make it as well.
19 straight games with 4 turnovers is wild.
Yeah, I looked it up last night because I had his post-game blurb. I started counting. It's like, hey, 4 is pretty low for him. And I looked at it. No, 4 is it is low, but it's kind of like the norm too. So yeah,
it's nuts. That's crazy.
James had a question about Dante DiVincenzo. We discussed that at the start of the show, so we won't go back over that. Is this Zaire Williams or Zion Williamson? I'm going to assume we can discuss both. Let's see if you throw it in here. No. I'm going to assume it's Zion Williamson.
Yeah.
Because I think he moves the needle a bit more in fantasy basketball. All due respect to Zaire Williams, but
but Zaire's been pretty solid the last
he
couple
has.
games.
You make a good point. So let's start with Zaire then. Brooklyn with all their injuries and kind of like they've been like a longer version of what Utah has been recently, where they've been a bit more competitive than they were supposed to be. And we're seeing some of these injuries crop up to guys who made them competitive. Like Cam Johnson's out another few games. Cam Thomas going to be out until after the road trip. D'Angelo Russell's out. Ben Simmons is out. So Zaire, Keon Johnson, those are guys that certainly have value right now. So they certainly won't be trade options for you unless you're trying to acquire them.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think he's a rosterable player at this point. Started their last 2 games, scored in double figures, put up like kind of a full stat line, shot well. Like as they get closer to the deadline and towards silly season, I think his minutes will only go up. So yeah, no, I think he's actually a rosterable player. So I don't think anybody else can have any other Zaire Williams questions, but I'm glad this got brought up.
Yeah. As for Zion Williamson, I would try to trade him. Like, look, man, he's back. It's great, but given the track record, I don't know how long I can count on him to stay healthy. So I think best case scenario, if you have him rostered, which is what I'm hoping for in my leagues, he blows up first game back, even on a minutes restriction, out the door. You try to trade him for whatever you can get because and I hate to say it, just feels like we're going to get like 4 or 5 games and he's back on the shelf for a nagging issue, unfortunately.
Yeah, hopefully he will be able to play, but I mean, it's the first night of a back-to-back tonight.
Yeah.
And then they have another back-to-back next week. So that's at least 2 more games that he's not going to play.
Awesome.
Which is, that's just the way it works out. I think something similar is happening with the Clippers have a back-to-back soon. I don't remember if it was they already had one or something. Maybe it was like within the next week or 2 they have a back-to-back. And it's like, okay, like Kawhi's not going to play. But it's still good to have him back out there. I think that this is kind of a good opportunity to sell high on Zion because, I mean, 2 days ago it was he's out indefinitely. And it was like a great time to buy low if you felt comfortable or like really wanted to do that. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's back. Okay, that's gone. You can't buy low. Well, you could sell high if somebody's like, oh, Zion's back. Like, maybe I don't know if it would even be a sell. I think it would still be a sell low in comparison to where you drafted him, but that's
Yeah.
okay. We need to just be looking at this season numbers. And if you can get somebody that's going to be out there on the court, that's a rosterable player, maybe like a top 75 guy, I think I'd feel better about that, especially if you've already had to deal with the headache of
Mhm.
Zion sitting on your IR. But if you're in a position where your team is first or second in your league, and you're fine to just wait and hope that Zion can get back to playing like a regular sized role in a bunch of games, then maybe I'm a little bit more patient than if I'm a team that's fighting to just barely make the playoffs at this point.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, I just need somebody out there.
Mhm. Good point. All right. Been holding Elsar all year. Illness yesterday was we'll say a backbreaker for the sake of this program. But are the good times about to finally roll with Ivy out? I think they can. You're not going to get like elite scoring. I think it's funny that between Alsar's illness and Malik Beasley going into the shooting slump at like the worst possible time, the two guys so many of us focused on as ads with Ivy out really haven't lived up to that thus far. So it's good to maintain some patience here. Maybe you also need to consider Tim Hardaway Jr. a bit more. Like he had an excellent night last night, but those have been few and far between for him as well. But we know he's going to be a starter regardless of what happens with Ivy.
Yeah, I do feel pretty good about Asar. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
interesting that like him and his brother are both entering the starting lineup at about the same
Yeah.
time because of injuries to actually top 5 picks from the 2022 draft, which is just kind of ironic.
Yeah.
Anyways, Asar Thompson did start before he missed their last game, had a like 10-point, 10 rebound, double, 6
Mm-hmm.
steals, didn't miss a shot. Yes, it is going to depend on categories. If you really need threes, then yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to provide you some value. But if you need anything else, Asar Thompson's probably the guy to go to. I think that it'll be because we saw what he did at the beginning of his rookie season. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we can see a lot of rebounds, defensive stats, as long as he's not even attempting a ton of threes. His field goal percentage should be pretty solid. So it'll be fun to kind of keep an eye on. I don't. It's not going to be Dyson Daniels level breakout with the steals, but he has a couple 5+ steal games recently. So I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, there we go. I would exercise some patience with these guys
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to be factors in Detroit as it is. So yeah, certainly hold on to outside. Trey Murphy is active. Is he going to the bench with Zion back, or would he displace Herb or Misi? Herb or Misi? Misi's going to start. I know we've had first and foremost, thanks for tuning in, Chad. But Misi, they're going to start Misi at the center position. Like you can play Zion at the 5 for like 3 stretches, but I don't believe you can start a game with him and play the majority of the minutes with that setup. So I think he'll stay. Herb Jones is too good defensively to get moved to the bench. So I think Trey will be the guy who gets dropped to the bench with Zion back. And he's dealing with an ankle injury right now. I believe he's already been ruled out for tonight. So, yeah, he's already out tonight. So there's your open roster spot right there in terms of the starting lineup.
Yeah, it does kind of stink. And I was gonna say this. Oh, like this is kind of the big question, isn't it? The Pelicans are finally gonna have to make, or I guess Willie Green's gonna have to make like a pretty tough decision here. But it's kind of made for him with Trey Murphy being out. But when he comes back, I just assume that whether it's the right decision or the decision he was going to make anyway, it's going to be like, oh well, this lineup is just the one we're rolling with. We'll have Trey back. But my guess is that Trey Murphy is back for their next game. It's the second night of a back-to-back. So Zion's out. So he'll just fill right back in. So we'll see. I imagine that Trey Murphy's the guy that comes off the bench, which stinks because it'll be the third year in a row that he's been a really good fantasy option that's just been limited by being stuck in a reserve role. But I don't know. The trade deadline's in a month. The Pelicans have a lot of very talented younger players that they just haven't been able to make it work with. Maybe we'll see if one or two of them is able to get moved to open up their game or open up minutes for whoever stays. That's definitely a team to keep an eye on with the trade deadline coming up.
Yeah, they definitely need to make some moves.
Yeah.
That roster's a mess. Guys can't stay healthy. And then once everyone is healthy, you just have like a traffic jam, so to speak, of players kind of in each other's way in terms of production. And Trey Murphy's a guy who really needs to be allowed to flourish. We saw him play well before the injury too. So, yeah. Should I trade Brandon Miller for Jaylen Brown? I know I've asked this before, but Miller got injured and GM backed out. Miller returned on Sunday. They pull up his stat line, loss to the Cavs. 8 of 14 from the field, 24 points, 6 3-pointers. Didn't get much in the rebounds or assists. He got you a block shot, but man, I think I'd rather have Brandon Miller, to be honest with you.
I think I would. I mean, Jaylen Brown's been Jaylen Brown, but with some slightly worse shooting numbers this year. A little bit of an uptick in some other areas, but I feel better about Brandon Miller, and part of that is his role in the lineup. Like, Boston is just so freaking talented, whereas Charlotte, Brandon Miller is the clear number 2. And I would say that when the team is fully healthy and everything's rolling, like Jaylen Brown's the number 2 behind Tatum there, or even at times the number 1. But if Derek White has his shot going, or if Kristaps Porzingis has having a good night, or heck, even Peyton Pritchard has having just like an incredible night, like, you know, and they blow teams out, like I feel pretty good about Brandon Miller, and Jaylen Brown has been kind of inconsistent this year. So I think I'd rather have Brandon Miller the rest of the season.
Yeah, but like they're both going to have similar places within their respective rotations. It's just that the guys behind Jaylen Brown are a lot better than the guys behind Brandon Miller, you know? So as Noah said, you're going to have nights where some of these other guys step up and they take kind of center stage for that group, as opposed to Jaylen Brown and even Jason Tatum. So, yeah, I'd rather have Brandon Miller in that scenario. Brian, good afternoon. Who has the better rest of the season for my 10-team 9-cat head-to-head? Drew Holiday or Ryan Dunn?
That's one of those ones that you just like imagine yourself hearing that in the preseason. Like,
Drew
Holiday or Ryan Dunn.
What?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, Drew Holiday is the safer option. I think I'd still lean Drew Holiday just because I feel a lot safer about it. And I feel like I'd be almost being too biased if I say, oh yeah, Ryan Dunn, because he hasn't, I don't know, the steal and block numbers I think will continue to improve, but they haven't been really, really good yet. So I don't know. Drew Holiday is probably the safer option. Plus, who knows? Like, things could change if they trade for Jimmy Butler, like, which we don't make moves based off potential trades, but it seems like Jimmy Butler wants to go to Phoenix. Well, what's the lineup look like there? Is Ryan Dunn's probably not starting, or he's getting sent back to Miami? And I don't know. There's a lot of speculation there. I feel like Drew Holiday is without a doubt the safer option.
Yeah. Like you said, the fact that we're having this discussion is absolutely wild. But yeah, I'm sticking with Drew. I know the overall value hasn't been what we've gotten used to with him, but he's still closing in on top 100 value after a slow start to the season. And he's been a 6th-round player over the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, I'm going with Drew. I know Ryan Dunn moving into the starting lineup is definitely good, but the resume is just too extensive for Drew Holiday to pick Ryan Dunn in this spot. Okay. Brian's other question, who are your fantasy winners so far? Norman Powell and Malik Monk, he mentions as 2 possibilities. I think those are both good choices. Monk, especially after he moved into the starting lineup. Dyson Daniels, another guy that he's been lights out when he had some injuries recently, but overall he's been excellent in terms of fantasy value. Jalen Johnson, too, down in Atlantic. So those are 2 guys that I would definitely have as among my fantasy winners right now.
You mentioned my Hawks players. I'll mention your Knicks players. We got Josh Hart, I think, is up there. Cam Johnson, it's obviously the other New York team, but John Collins, I think, is another guy that I didn't ever expect to be very fantasy relevant again, but he's been good, and hopefully he can keep that up.
Don Vooch, too. Like, top 10 value. That's top 10 value for him is absurd. He's hanging on. We expected a drop off, but He's still hanging on right now.
I think he's like never ever. Maybe like one time his career, I'm pulling it up right now, like finished outside the top 50, and he was top 50 last year. It was like once or twice before that, like his rookie year, second year. But I think he's never actually had a top 10 finish. Yeah, so the outside of his rookie year, his worst season was top 50, which was last year, and it's exactly 50th per Basketball Monster. But he has 2 seasons finishing 11th. Never finished 10 or better. So this is technically the best fantasy season of his career per Basketball Monsters rankings. It's wild.
I'm now rooting.
Well, everyone peaks at 34, right?
Yeah, I'm now rooting for him to finish in the top 10. I need to see that happen this year.
That'd be good.
And this message, okay, he managed to trade Chet for Paul George and Josh Hart. They need to get out of 9th place. Understandable. We don't know when Chet's going to be back, and need active guys at this point when you're in 9th. So,
yeah, I think getting a potential top 25 player and a guy that's actually been a top 25 player for a guy that who knows when he's going to play again. Yeah, phenomenal trade. I don't know when the league ends, like when your playoffs are, but if it's just kind of standard, like who knows? Chet might be on a strict minutes restriction the rest of the season when he comes back, and even if he comes back, I don't remember the earliest. It could be like later this month. I don't remember the exact timeline. It might be next month, or may not even be till March. He might be on like a 15 to 20 minutes restriction until later in March and April as they approach the playoffs. So yeah, no, that's a phenomenal trade to get Paul George and Josh Hart.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Plus, the February schedule gets a bit screwy with the All-Star break. So that's another thing to take into consideration. So I think that was a good move on your part. Jay Quiz taps in with what's Tsunami Poppy's rest of season outlook. Is he a fringe 12-team 9-cat streamer or a must roster? And for those who don't know, Tsunami Poppy is Kelly Oubre Jr. So be clear on that. We knew that, but obviously, thanks to Jay Quiz for offering the clarification for those who may not. But
I think I would lean more towards fringe rosterable player. I think now that they're pretty much healthy. Like Embiid is still in and out of the lineup, and that's never going to stop. But they have Maxey, they have Paul George. Like Kelly Oubre played well in their last game, but Embiid wasn't playing. So I think he is a streamable player, but I don't think he's a guy that you just have to have rostered at this point.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think right now he's definitely worth having with Embiid down, but there may come a point where you just have to let him go later in the season. Should we be worried about the potential rest for players such as Scotty Barnes in March? His league's playoffs end on March 23rd. If so, what's the lowest you would trade for him? 42 fantasy points per game at the moment, ESPN points leagues.
Yeah, I think that is something that you could be a little bit concerned about, but I think you also need to take a look at where your team is. Like if you're a top 1 or 2 seed, you're pretty much locked in for the playoffs. You can take a little bit of a hit. You don't have to. You can try and trade for somebody that's equivalent value. But you can take a little bit of a hit to maybe have somebody that's definitely going to be playing in the playoffs. Whereas if you're trying to, like, you're barely in the playoff picture, like you can't take a hit there just because you may not make the championship. It may not matter if Scotty Barnes is playing in March 23rd if your team gets eliminated March 2nd. So I wouldn't take too much of a value hit regardless of where my team is, just off the fact that he may or may not play then, because you could trade for somebody that just gets hurt around then. That's just the reality of the situation. Or maybe Toronto is like tanking is hard or something. I can't imagine, but like there's like a 5% chance of that happening, that they're like, yeah, no, we're just going to keep trying. And, if we miss out on Cooper Flag because we were winning games and developing culture, then sure. It's like, okay, whatever you want to do. So I don't think I'd be looking to take too much of a hit.
Yeah. Barnes is a 6th-round player right now, but obviously you aren't going to be selling that because of what he can do when at his peak. I'm thinking maybe like a fourth round. That would be the lowest I would go there. That's what I would say. But I can't really come up with like any names. Like I
Yeah,
don't think someone would trade you like, for example, Cade Cunningham for Scotty Barnes.
right.
But
Would you do oh, maybe that's would you trade Scotty Barnes for LeBron?
I think I would.
Okay. Would you
You're
trade
rolling the dice because he's
yeah.
40, but you know he's going to play whenever he can because they're trying to win now.
Would you trade him for Jordan Poole?
Um,
I mean, that's another. I guess
right?
that's another guy that could get shut down as well.
That's another shutdown situation. And
Yeah.
Jordan Poole's
Trying to,
played well, but he's a little too unpredictable for me. So
what about here? We'll do one more. What about
yeah.
Paul George? Would you trade Scotty Barnes for Paul George?
Paul's been bad, but
He's been bad.
yeah. Oh man, because I think Philly's in a similar spot to LA where they need to win now. I don't think Paul's going to continue to be as poor as he's been, so I think I would take that swing as well.
Okay. I think that's probably the lowest value I'd be looking to go because we know what he can be, but he's
Yeah,
like literally averaging 16 points per game and he's shooting atrociously. But he has
yeah,
only since he made a delayed season debut, but he's only missed 5 games since then. Like he's been pretty available,
hmm
which is good. He hasn't missed a game since early December. It's been over a month. So
yeah,
um yeah, I think that'd be an interesting one because Paul George definitely can't get much worse than he has been.
yeah.
I mean, fingers crossed, of course, but
hmm It's got another question. Do you think Jaime Jaquez Jr. is worth a flyer at the moment? I mean, first career triple double and 5 steals last night, so definitely boosts his profile. Or would you take a punt on someone like Najee Marshall with all the injuries in Dallas? I think I'd prefer Najee.
ooh, that's a tough one. I think
It is. Yeah.
both guys.
Yeah.
Can you say both? Like maybe I think Najee Marshall's opportunity may be there more, especially over the next
In
couple
the
of
short
weeks.
term. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Miami, who knows what's going to happen with Jimmy Butler? Like, is Pat Riley going to be a little petty and not make any sort of trade?
Mhm.
Like, would he just try and out petty Jimmy Butler and just not trade him? I saw there was a report that it like after this suspension for Jimmy Butler, they may bring him back. I don't remember whose report that was. So I don't know how valid it is, but
Mhm.
maybe it's not like Jimmy Butler has definitely played his last game in Miami. But I think both of them short term are guys that I would be interested in rostering.
Yeah. I think the inconsistency of Miami's rotation on the wings is why
Yeah,
I
that's
hesitate to go with Jaquez here. Because who knows who it's going to be on any given night. Like, he's going to play rotation minutes, but I think that's why I would go with Najee Marshall in the short term. And then, I don't know, maybe trade deadline Jaquez would have greater value, but that's tough to say too.
yeah, because if they do trade Jimmy Butler, I mean, it seems like, and things change like that, but it could be some sort of deal centered around Bradley Beal because Jimmy
hmm
Butler wants to be in Phoenix. So then you're just bringing in another scorer that needs the ball in his hands, and that
Yeah.
changes Hawkins' role. So I think this is a great situation for both of them because it's not some sort of move that's bringing back other mouths to feed. It's taking superstar that takes lots of shots or has the ball in his hands a lot out of the situation. And in Dallas's case, I think it's both Luka and Kyrie. So like that even
hmm
helps even more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like both of them a lot short term.
All right. Terry Rozier, rest of the season, and will he get traded? Um, I don't know if there's much of a market for him in a trade. Like, at least for him, like maybe he's included in a deal to get moved elsewhere. But uh, rest of season value, I think, as we discussed just a minute ago, it's going to depend on if they move Jimmy Butler and who comes in. in return. Because obviously it's going to be a star level player just because of the finances. But yeah, Rozier's been a disappointment for me in fantasy this year, and I don't really know if that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, he is a tough player to evaluate because we know what he's capable of, and we know what he was doing just last season, and it just hasn't happened this year. I think he's a fine player to roster. I don't think he's a must roster player. And as far as will he get traded, I don't know. Like I don't know if maybe his contract is something that's more tradable. I don't think any team's gonna be like, we're Terry Rozier away from winning a championship. Like, let's do this thing. But he's getting 25 mil a year. Like, do they attach him with? That's entirely speculation. I don't even know if I want to do that. But is that a reason that he's traded? So I wouldn't say it's a guarantee that he's traded. Like, he might just stick it out in Miami, and who knows what their team looks like after the deadline. It's hard to say.
Yeah, he's due to get a little over 26.6 million next year, and he'll be a free agent in 2026, I should say. So not the easiest contract to move, especially when you're also having to deal with the Jimmy Butler situation. So we got a month. We'll see what happens down there. Made the mistake of drafting Kawhi Leonard. What would you recommend now that he is finally playing at least?
I mean, you waited for this.
Yeah.
You showed excellent patience. I'd say just keep your fingers crossed that the production goes up as the minutes go up. I have him in, I think, 2 leagues. So yeah, I've been just sitting there patiently. And hopefully it'll benefit me sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
If somebody's willing to pay a ridiculous price, then I do it. But I wouldn't say sell yourself short. You're the one who had him on your roster while he was not playing. Now that he's playing, you're gonna sell low. Like, I wouldn't do that. I would either make someone pay full price, or you just sit there and keep your fingers crossed.
It's like playing the slots in Vegas, man. You spend so many pulls on that thing, and you're gonna get up, like, and then someone else
what if the next one hits?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the danger of gambling. But yeah, I think I'm in agreement there. Yeah, you kind of knew that Kawhi was going to miss time. We didn't know how much, but at this point, you're in. You're in. It's like some Charles that said, once we at war, we at war. It's on a lie, and we fight on that lie. So hold on to that, man.
Yeah. That's
Daniel. Hey, we got a little bit of the wiring on the show today.
There we go.
All right, Daniel, thanks for tuning in. Would you drop Max Christie for Kyle Kuzma? Number 1, my 10-team 9-cat head-to-head league. Assist turnover ratio instead of turnovers. Good efficiency, but could use Kuzma's potential scoring.
This is another one where it's like, imagine asking someone that beginning of the season. Like, Kuzma's not only on my waiver wire, but I also have Max Christie rostered, and I'm considering making the switch. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, if you have good efficiency, I guess I would consider it. But on the flip side, it's that shutdown question. And maybe there's the other factor for Kuzma, the trade deadline. Is he I think he's someone that Washington could potentially look to move. Because they've got young guys at his position that they probably want to play more. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I would hold Max Christie. As crazy as that sounds to hear or even say on my part, I think I would hold on to Max Christie for now.
Yeah, because I would be afraid of Kuzma coming in and like ruining your team's efficiency, seriously, like if it's a strength and then you add this guy who has a negative assist turnover ratio over the course of the season, and he shot the ball better the last few games, like since returning from that injury. So like fingers crossed that continues, but he hasn't shot the ball well. The turnovers are pretty high. Like those aren't strengths of his, and the assists have taken a pretty big hit this year. I mean, pretty much everything has taken a hit this year. So I think it's fine to just keep holding Max Christie. The potential scoring would be nice, but I don't know. I feel like you have to sacrifice a lot of what your team is built off of to make that happen.
Yeah, I don't trust Kyle Kuzma. In fantasy, I just don't trust him. So yeah, I would not make that move. Daniel asks, is Dennis Schroeder still a hold in shallow category leagues? Absolutely not. It,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's over for the man, but this has not gone well at all from a fantasy standpoint or a actual basketball standpoint.
Yeah, which I think is kind of what we expected. Like he still had a couple good games here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we kind of expected that Dennis Schroeder was a candidate to be traded early in the season when he was playing incredibly well. As soon as it was Golden State, it was like, okay, like they're still playing to start him. Maybe they can make this thing work. And I think we had a little bit of a false sense of optimism here just because he had been playing really well and it seemed like a good move for Golden State. But I don't think he is a player that you have to hold. I mean, you can do it and just like hope that it is better, but no, he's not like a must roster player.
We all knew he'd take a hit.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't think the hit would be this severe. Like, yeah, I don't. It's been rough. All right. Let's see. We got a two-part here. Chad has OG Ananobi, Josh Hart, and Mikal Bridges in his weekly lineup. He's in third place right now. And he asks, is that too much of one team in a weekly format if my only goal right now is to get that one seed? I feel like 3-game weeks will destroy me. I think it can be if you have weekly lineups. Because you pretty much, if you have a 3-game week, you can only play. I don't know if you can play all 3 of those guys in a weekly lineup. So yeah, I think maybe if you look to try to trade one of them, I'm not really sure which one I would try to trade. I think Hart's too valuable in category leagues to part ways with him, at least for me. Maybe if you can sell someone on Bridges' improved shooting, he'd probably be the one I would try to move in terms of category league, if that's what you're playing in right now.
Yeah, the reason he was saying it was a conflict of interest is I was looking at it, just confirming this is a dynasty league, that 30-team dynasty league, which obviously probably alters the opinion of how you should move these guys. But his team is sitting in third. My team is tanking, so it's not really a conflict of interest unless he wants. Unless you're really let's pitch him on Laurie Markkinen right here, Matt. Yeah, if you want to trade me some Knicks and a first-round pick or 3. We can make something happen. But no, I mean that part is kind of iffy. Just like the fact that it is 3 of your, I believe, 7 starters that are on the same team. But I don't know. With it being a 30-team dynasty, you could try and make some sort of move just to kind of diversify your assets a little bit. But I think having those guys along with the other guys in the starting lineup are Devin Booker, Dyson Daniels, Keegan Murray, and John Collins. Like, I think it's pretty solid. But if he wants to trade me some firsts, I will help him diversify his assets.
Wu-Tang Financial, diversify your bonds, man. All right. Well, Zion crushed Misi's run. I'm going to say no. What Misi brings to the table is completely different. I don't think you need to have the basketball in your hands to rebound. So rebound and block shots. So I think he'll be fine.
My one concern there would be they're like, oh, Zion's back. Him and Yves Misi cannot shoot at all. We need to get a big that can space the floor a little bit more. And whether that ends up being Daniel Tice, which would be just unreal if that ends up being what takes away from Yves Misi, or they make a move at the deadline, which, again, I don't think that they're going to be making win now moves at the deadline. I think those are like the slight 2% chance of happening fears that I have, but I'm pretty confident in Misi.
Scotty Barnes or Alperen Şengün?
Probably lean Şengün just because I feel just not a shutdown candidate.
Yeah.
He's been a little bit more consistent.
Yep. Team Alpy here as well. Going back to the Barnes discussion, would you trade Scotty Barnes for Devin Booker?
Yeah.
I would. Yeah. Is Malcolm Brogdon done? You know what, man?
Sure.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
yeah. It's similar situation with Kuzma and Jordan Poole. They've got younger guys at his position, like Bub Carrington. Definitely want to see a bit more of him. Keyshawn George as well. He's more of a wing than a guard, but he's another guy you probably want to see a lot more of after the trade deadline. So in Brogdon, I don't think he's done enough to kind of merit that level of trust and fantasy right now either. So yeah, I think it's over for him this year.
Yeah, I think the one thing would be is he a guy that could be traded at the deadline? But if you remember from last season when he was with Portland and there was talks of him being traded at the deadline, there was reports that he was just happy to be there. Like he just enjoyed being in Portland, enjoyed being on like a rebuilding team and investing in the young guards there. And I wouldn't be shocked if that's what happens again. He missed a lot of time and is basically like a overpaid assistant coach.
Yeah, he's a good vet. He's definitely a good vet to have on your roster. So
there's unless somebody's giving like first round picks for him, there's no reason for them to trade him. So yeah, I'm not really seeing a scenario where he's making much of a fantasy impact for the rest of the season.
Yeah. So with the recent performances, was it Mike Brown's fault? No, I think that's reading too much into it. Like, regardless of sport, you're going to see like a new manager, a new head coach bump. I think Doug Christie, being an assistant coach, he probably saw some things with that rotation that maybe Mike Brown didn't see. Like Keon Ellis has played more minutes since the coaching.
That was my thing.
So hey, you have a different perspective. I just want to note that we're approaching 2 weeks since any Kings decision maker, since the firing, that we've heard from any Kings decision maker. So, it'd probably be nice for your fan base to hear from Imani McNair or Vivek Ranadive, since they're the ones who made the choice to fire the man instead of De'Aaron Fox and letting him take the hits. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think you can tell which, and I don't mean this is like a anti-Kings propaganda, but like you can tell which organizations handle things a little bit more professionally. And I think that a lot of players and coaches and people that would potentially work in that organization would see that. And it would speak volumes. So I just think it's just an all around, just like a disaster of a situation. Even though on the court it's been great. They've won 5 games in a row now. I think the main thing is like why Keon Ellis wasn't getting more minutes was very frustrating to me and confusing to me and a lot of people. I think he was one of the guys that in like preseason, I was like, take a late round flyer on him. He was so good down the stretch last year. Like he's going to start. And obviously that didn't happen at the beginning of the year. Now that Malik Monk's starting, I don't think it's going to happen, but hopefully there will be enough minutes for him to continue to be a really good source of defensive stats and threes.
Now you get Devin Carter back too. So really interested to see what he can do with his opportunity. Lou Dort or Mike Conley in a points league 14-teamer.
I'd lean Dort.
Yeah.
Don't feel good about
he's going to start. Yeah. He's going to start. He's going to play good minutes. Yeah, I would go Lou Dort at this point. All right. Dylan Brooks or Najee Marshall in a points 12-teamer. This is another one don't really feel great about. I don't know. What do you think?
I think Najee because of the opportunity. I mean, I think it would be a short-term stream, but I would rather go Najee.
I can see that, especially in the short term. But
yeah.
All right. Chad adds that the Pelicans are rumored to be in the veteran center market. All right.
Maybe they push for the play-in.
The Chicago Bulls of the West. Let's go, man. All right, and we'll wrap up with this one. Is it a good time to buy low on Jonathan Kuminga? Seeing he won't be playing for another 3 weeks, I guess you can say it is. But if you're looking for value right now, I would not do that.
And is he a player that's worth buying low on? Like if he was a top 75 guy that was going to be out for 3 weeks and you are in a situation where you feel comfortable buying low and it's a team that needs production now, then sure. But I mean, he's had some good games recently, but it hasn't been very consistent this year. I don't know if it is. It is the best time to buy low. I just don't know if he's
Yeah,
worth a buy low.
yeah, it's a good way to put it. That inconsistent rotation just doesn't help matters at all, though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've done our hour. Just as always, thank you guys for tuning in and asking questions. Reminder, we've got the Rotoworld basketball show tomorrow with ourselves and Dan Titus at Yahoo Sports. And we will be back for another Q&A next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.